Good morning, beautiful people. Welcome to another episode of Kiko's Free Thinkers Forum, episode 37. And we're here in the presence of a very special guest. His name is Gavin Bonney, and he's running as an independent candidate for the office of President of the United States in 2024. We're going to get to learn a lot about Mr. Bonney today and his views. I was looking over his site some before we got on the air, and I followed him for a while on Twitter, and so I thought it would be appropriate to bring him on just to have more representation. I've reached out to other political parties, and they have not responded, and so we have some independents in the field that are going to be participating in an independent forum for presidential candidates on this particular forum, Kiko's Free Thinkers Forum. And if Gavin agrees to that, he can be a part of that as well. And we're going to have that in the summer. But I want to say now, I appreciate you accepting the invitation and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm flattered that you went through my website and actually read it. Um, uh, it's I started from the bottom, so uh, it's cool. It's cool to be noticed.
Absolutely. And that's what we try to do on the forum. We're legitimately independent. No one gives us money. I haven't accepted any donations yet. I really just want people's minds. I want us to engage with inquiring minds. And if people do want to send a donation, that's good. But I'm not going to really promote it anymore. I think we're in such a time now to where we really have to start talking to each other and trying to understand from each other and grow and just stop being so compromised by money and money concerns and because we still have our brains and you
Exactly.
can allow people to take that away or you cannot allow them to take it away. And so I try to platform people who have free thinking minds and maybe we can battle outside of this paradigm and we can grow something from the outside. And when you ran as an independent, I saw that on your site is one of the first things that sticks out before I clicked into your Google Doc. And I wanted to ask you what went into that decision to come to run as an independent, and can you give the audience just a little bit information into your background, a brief introduction?
Well, um, the reason I I chose to run independent really is because I registered as an independent when I turned 18. Um, I, as far as my background politically, I've never ran for office or anything before, but I've definitely always in the back of my mind been always kind of had my ear to it, kind of looked to it. And and I grew up like so sorry. Um and I grew up watching stuff like Jon Stewart and stand-up comedy in the early 2000s. And I was 13 when 9/11 happened, and I just like when Building 7 fell, I guess is a good starting point. Um, I was 13, your frontal lobe's fully developed at 13 years old. And I just, I couldn't tell you exactly who did it, but um, I knew it was bullshit, right? Like I saw Building 7 fall, and I remember the newscast on CNN. The newscast on CNN, the lady, she said, "Oh, Building 7 fell because of aftershocks like an earthquake." It was like, to kind of paraphrase it. And I remember because I had grown up on the West Coast, I've lived through an earthquake before I was 13. And I was like, that's not how aftershocks work. The earth didn't shake. A plane flew into a building, like, and I'm a cynical teenager. So, that that's that's kind of where it started, and there's just like always a little voice in the back of my head. And I kind of noticed through high school, as they start to teach you about politics and everything, I really, excuse me, I was always really attracted to the idea of like the center, and what goes around comes around, right? So you have the left and the right. I don't know if you're mirrored or whatever. But eventually it all comes back to anarchy or no government or fascism, like, you know, a single leader, every form of government, everything. So to me, that's why I remained independent, because um, the two parties, well, we shouldn't even have the two-party system. We were warned in the first place not to have a two-party system.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the world works the way it works, but that's why I'm an independent. I've always just kind of, the veil was removed kind of early, and then through military service, I saw things a little differently. I've always kind of been an introvert, a little to myself, a little more of like, I guess, a sigma male instead of like an alpha or a beta or whatever the trendy stuff is. Um, and I didn't necessarily always know that, right? But that's just kind of always how I've been. And so I got to go through the military and just kind of observe things. I got hurt kind of early in my career, so I kind of, it was a little easier for me than other people, we'll put it that way. And but I got to see things like the money side of it and everything like that. Um and given some of the other things that that I'm drawn to spiritually and politically, and as far as my viewpoints, um that's why I remained independent, I guess. Sorry.
That's a really, honestly, it's a very fascinating way you described it. I've never heard it described that way, but you hit on a point. When we think about these political spectrums, and I think we get so caught up in left and right paradigms, all these binaries and dichotomies, left, right, left, right.
Yeah.
What does that even mean anymore? When you start to see just all these events developing, and
Well,
you see whose interests they protect and whose interests they don't protect. And I think you kind of alluded to that when you talked about
yeah.
anarchy and fascism and that.
Yeah, it's in the two-party system. That whole idea there is polarization, and it's something that really upsets me, especially in recent years. Um, because what happens is you get people, instead of like having a conservative and a liberal value, if someone says something that is perceived as one or the other, they all of a sudden they're in a box, and
Mm-hmm.
they all have to be that, like, you you said something liberal, you love Joe Biden, you said you love America, you love Donald Trump, and it's like, I don't like either of those guys. you
Exactly.
know I they they're old, they're out of touch. They have enough money to just go play golf. Like, why do they even need to be the president? Neither of them served in the military. I think that's something that's lost with, the type of government that the United States was born as. The president's supposed to kind of just be in charge of the military a little bit, and write, sign bills and stuff like that. But it's like, it's all of a sudden, it's like all your life's problems are because of the president, and everybody's just fighting for no reason. And everything, I mean, gosh, we've, as bad as inflation and all the first world problems we have, it's like, gosh, we have everything we could possibly need in the United States. Um and I think if we were all if we had a little more grateful attitudes, or whatever, um we and just appreciate what we'd have, we could build something way better than what we have now, because what we're doing now is just stupid, um in a lot of ways. I mean, it's out of control, and it's stupid, and it's like, there's a lot of people that, like, don't necessarily have an opinion as to why it's stupid, but they know it's stupid now. you know
Mm-hmm.
and it's and the average person uh can't just enjoy the opportunity to be alive, because it's almost like debt's the prison, the gatekeeper, right? And everyone is just stuck in debt, and it makes them miserable, and it's sad because we have everything we need, but we also don't.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're forced to buy things that we shouldn't have to buy, or we shouldn't be buying, or we could grow in our own yard. But we're stuck in this because we're in such like a rat race, this vicious cycle. It's too fast. It's like too much consumerism.
Mm-hmm.
We're wasting away. We're getting depressed, and we're going in debt, and we're not just sitting back and enjoying what we have.
I 100% agree. And you hit on two things too. Before we get a little bit into your background, like if you want to share that information, because I sort of give each candidate a chance to kind of
Yeah.
to see how you've explored this difficult world that we live in. But you alluded to two things, which are the limits of the presidency, really the commander in chief and endorsing stuff. Episode 8 with Tyler King, we talk about how we put so much stress on the president, the president, the president. When you have a whole Congress and all this other stuff working together, and I would argue that the Congress has more power than the president does.
We're working together to work against each other so that we all argue with each other.
That's a good way to put it. That's a good way to put it. And I'll get to that in a second, as far as like how you would, I guess, how you view government, and how you would try to work with different political affiliations and stuff to promote different policies or whatnot. But what is your story? Like, what's a little bit into your backstory? You say that you're from Oregon. Like, how was growing up? And you mentioned 9/11. That was a traumatic event for a lot of people. But do you come from a working class family? Like what is your background?
Yeah, I come from a working class family. My dad retired out of BLM. My mom retired out of the post office. My sister actually works for either the forestry or BLM now. I was in the Navy, so we've all served in the government. In my immediate family, or worked for the government. I grew up on a river. I didn't really grow up in a town. There was a logging town really close by, Lyons, Oregon. Not a lot of people. I grew up with a mountain bike, went outside a lot, rode around. I had pretty much, I had a perfect childhood, and that's part of the reason that I have this little voice in the back of my head telling me to do this. Is like, I would like for everybody to just have the opportunity to do nothing like I had growing up. And people say that's kind of funny, but it's like, I could sit under a tree and just watch the river flow, because that's where I grew up, and it was amazing. And I'm really grateful for that. And I had to watch that house burnt down. The house I grew up in burnt down in 2020 in the fires here in Oregon. That was pretty exciting. 72 the first 72 hours was amazing, I'll tell you what.
Oh,
some things I should admit to doing on camera with beer, but oh man. But yeah, so yeah, I grew up on the West Coast. Didn't have a hard childhood, but we weren't affluent or anything like that. I played bass in high school, in the jazz band. I was the first chair bassist, and actually kind of like bringing that up because what I learned from music, because I played jazz, I learned music theory. And once you learn music theory, it kind of opens up your eyes to a different way of thinking and your approach to anything. Because you're building, like, you have chords, and you build, you can build 3 or 4 different songs with the same chords, right? And so that's something in my background that I think is really important for my thinking. Sorry, my other phone's ringing.
no, you're good. I appreciate that. We need innovation, but I think is not just automation that we think of. I think we need the first innovation should start with the mind. Like I've always said that on the forum, and it sounds like you
Right.
definitely have a free thought spirit about you, and I think we honestly need that for the country. We need someone that can break through these constant waves of just not, I don't even want to say propaganda. It's just negativity, just the
Yeah.
way we dialogue with each other, communication. We
Yeah.
have some kind of sanity within that communication.
Right. And it's a very powerful tool. And if you get into some of the more, I'll call it some of the more hippy dippy stuff, I believe, and just like the power of manufacturing consent, it's the negative. There's a way. There's just a way they can negatively charge media. It gets your attention, and it just there's a lot of science to it. Well, leave it at
Hmm.
that. You might even know more than me because I see that you're a doctor. So
Oh,
yeah, you know, um, but yeah,
um, I wanted to say a couple of things before your site or whatever, because some of the stuff you mentioned already, I want to know more about before we even get into some of your stances, which you've already discussed a few of them. Um, what is your view on the military being a veteran yourself? You say you served for the U.S. Navy.
yeah.
What is your view on? I guess, do you see a purpose of the military, and what is that capacity of the purpose, and what's your overall view of government?
Um, well, I think we're at a point where there's so many people in the world that, as much as I would like to just eliminate all government, we we have to dampen it at the very least. Um, but I think in a newer, brighter, more enlightened world, you don't need a lot of government, right? But you do need checks and balances because people will get out of control. That's just part of the universe. Um, you know, what goes around comes around. One hand washes the other. They can't really exist without each other. So, um, the military itself, I think all nations should have a standing military. Um, I think we should use ours a lot differently than we do. I think we've kind of been the punching bag of the world, and maybe like NATO and the UN, kind of like we're the police. We always go and do all this stuff, and really it really ends up helping is a lot of corporations and people that are just way above my pay grade. and um and it's kind of ridiculous. And I've always kind of had thoughts, being in the military, without the military, um, especially the U.S. military in the last 100 years, we wouldn't have a lot of what we have. I mean, and you say that even about the German military in World War II. There's a lot of technologies that were gained from all the evil, right? Um, so, but I think in the future, because I don't think we need to be fighting, hand to hand combat with 8 billion people. I don't think we need to be fighting hand to hand combat and shooting guns at each other. I think we're a little smarter than that now. Um, so the new military, could be kind of transferred maybe more into like a government service thing. Because one thing I liked about military service, especially being enlisted starting at E1, is you go to boot camp, um, for 8 to 13 weeks, depending on your branch, and you're in a room with approximately 100 people, for that time from all around the country, um, with all kinds of different viewpoints and all kinds of different versions of the same viewpoints. And you learn through adversity how to live with each other and how to be a team and how to be friends. And you always, when you're in the Navy, especially, um, you know, you have your Liberty buddies, right? So like you always have, after your military service, you always have this instant friends wherever you go. And I think that that's something we could take from the military, you know, in the future to create, you know, a more unified country, because you just the camaraderie alone is worth all the pain, and just learning how to deal with people from all backgrounds of life. There's no military in the world that's as diverse as the U.S. military, um, and I think that's something that's often overlooked. And um, I mean, I would, as a president, I would build a stronger military. I don't know if I would spend more money on it, or I wouldn't want to go to more wars. My whole thing would definitely be to get rid of these just stupid, endless proxy wars, you know, that I've been watching since I was a teenager. Like, why? It just doesn't make any sense. But when you look at something like the interstate system, or the highway system, those programs, Eisenhower, that was designed for maintenance, and we're at a point where um, there's a lot of maintenance that hasn't been done on all these roads, and it's just like, gosh, what if the military became that working force, and then you could open up the doors to so many more people, because there'd be a lot less combat. And then people, they could serve their 2 to 4 years. Like if they didn't go to college, they could go to the military or this government service and help rebuild the infrastructure of the country. And then they'd come out paid, because that's another thing about the military. Like if you go in as an officer, for example, you come out paid and with work experience instead of college. You come out a lot of times with debt, depending on your degree.
Dr.
So,
Dick right here.
yeah. And so, maybe a quick bounce over to student debt and things like that. I think an obvious solution I kind of thought of for that is just, you graduate high school at 18, you're an adult in the United States at 18, you get one interest-free loan for your schooling if you choose to go to a secondary school. I think that's a fair thing, right? And then that way you can pay it off eventually. I think, because what I noticed with my friends in the military and like my sister and people who have college degrees who have like the federal loans, is the difference between their debt and like my credit card debt is you can't default on that. And I actually had a roommate whose student debt went up while he was paying it off, because of the payment that he had agreed to at the time. And I think everything's taken care of now. But I mean, that's just ridiculous. You can't get ahead with that. You're gonna pay plenty of, when you take out a loan from a bank for your car and your house, you're gonna pay plenty of interest to the bank on that, and you're gonna learn your lessons that way. I think you should have the opportunity to take a loan out for school, but I also think you should have that opportunity to pay, because it's interest free. That should give you the opportunity to pay it off, even if you pay it off when you're 50 years old, finally, the last dollar. That's a sense of accomplishment in itself. It's like, at least I paid that off. I paid off my education. I paid that thing off, because it's good for everyone to have some kind of goal, right? And you can't just eliminate all the debt, like in in a world that's already completely imbalanced, and where inflation is already out of control, and inflation itself is not something you can stop ever. You can slow it down, but it's never going to stop. And that doesn't mean that the system is wrong. It's just something you have to consider when you take out loans. And that, I guess that really should be kind of said to the government. Excuse me.
No, I kind of I've heard that more, that stance, and I respect that stance. I don't agree with it, but I understand it. I've had some libertarians come on that have had pretty similar stances, because a lot of what you talk about on your site is revolved around monetary policy, inflation, and is that that's actually a good segue because I wanted to get into some of that, talk about monetary policy and stuff. But I wanted to say about your site is really interesting. You have a lot of pictures and a lot of memes and everything else,
Yeah.
and it's a Google Doc, which because
Yeah.
you have it linked to your Twitter, which is smart because you don't have to deal with the maintenance of a
Right.
website and everything. But it's
Yeah. And
interesting the way you have it written out. Just I'm actually going to read a couple of these sentences out. But you were about to say something?
oh yeah. Well, one thing that's kind of funny about it is I paid for my domain name. I think I need to pay more money, but you're supposed to be able to type it in just like the bonnieforpresident.com or whatever, bring back my
Hmm.
but for some reason it only works when you click on the link, and I need to work that out. But
Oh, I see. I see.
anyway, but yeah, I went with Google because I mean I've used Google for a lot of things. So anyway, continue.
No, your site is interesting. Just because I was looking, I kept clicking around. I was like, well, because everyone else's sites is like they have all these bullet points, and then they have just pages and pages and pages of information. But the thing I like about your site is that I can extract that information. We can build on it, and I kind of get a general idea of what you prioritize. Um, you have the First Amendment on here, like that's front center, and then you talk a lot about monetary policy. You have a whole section called the New Deal. The
Yeah.
First Amendment I won't go through too much because I mean this forum is all about First Amendment. I mean
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty straightforward stance, but I mean in these times I mean the First Amendment has been under condemnation.
Yeah.
Um, the censorship has only gotten stronger over the years, and I've told my audience that that these are bipartisan agreements that has caused this censorship to increase in this surveillance, the Patriot Act, the Telecommunications Act, all these
Mhm.
different laws that they passed, um, and people just sit around like it just happened
Yeah.
overnight. I mean, but they're doing this. They've been working towards more
Yeah.
censorship.
Yeah, and that's something that like people my age, I'm a I'm a 80s baby, so I'm a millennial, but I almost think us 80s babies kind of I almost feel like we're in a separate mind thought from the millennials and the Gen X.
100%.
Um, it's a little different, and yeah. Uh, sorry, I lost my train of thought a little bit there.
No, you're good. I was going to let me see. I wanted to read. Let's look at one of your first points under the New Deal category. You
Yeah,
say socialized healthcare is not an evil concept. Implementation is crucial to execution. I've never understood why Obamacare manifested. The reason is because the New Deal gave us Medicare and Social Security. Medicare and Social Security were originally intended for all Americans experiencing hardship. If the nation wasn't caught in a runaway currency system, Social Security and Medicare should, would, could be in the black from all the taxes input since the New Deal. Medicare and Social Security, if implemented correctly, could replace the need for acquiring private insurance for healthcare. This would require doctors and pharmaceutical companies to operate with honesty and integrity. Pretty straightforward. I think that's a universal message that could reach lots of people.
yeah, and uh, right, because well, actually, what I was lost my train of thought on was about to say is I hate redundancy in law, and like the petty laws. Um, I it's just so silly to me. Like, why are you making all these? And I, I simplify. That's kind of keep it simple, stupid. The KISS method. That's kind of my approach at life because I'm kind of stupid, right? Like that's
No, it
um
didn't seem like that way to me at all. Having this conversation, no, I think you have some great ideas, and I wanted to talk about the Medicare Social Security. So where does this fall? So you inherently think that those are good things.
yeah, right, because we're at a point in history and humanity where we are very civilized and there are a lot of us and we have a lot of creature comforts. So we can take care of the weak. You know, if you look at it from a biological standpoint, I don't want to get people too riled up, but we can take care of the weak now. And there's no reason we shouldn't if we're doing things out of the good of our heart, right? And there's no reason, you know, but at the same time we should all, you know, do our fair share, but we don't have, it's just the rate we're at and the proportion of who gets what is what's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So
so where does that fall with I kind of I had issues with the UBI, and I admit I still don't, I haven't quite grasped the concept of UBI, Universal Basic Income.
yeah,
But
and
yeah.
I haven't edited the site there for over a year, and UBI is kind of interesting. Universal basic income, you know, you look at, I think I posted a link, it talks about Nero doing that in Rome, and
Mm-hmm.
so I think it's a slippery slope, right? Like you need the social security, right? You need the Medicare for times when people are unemployed, um you know, they get hurt, et cetera, et cetera. But if it's just so automatic, if it's too automatic, people as a whole might get too lazy, which could lead to other kinds of social problems like mass depression, you know, health issues, you know, because people aren't up and working as much, which would lead to a lot more death. And so it's, to me, it's like what needs to happen more than anything is things like buying a house need to be possible for the regular person again, right? Um, you can't, you just, like, you can't really buy a house anymore like you used to. Like my parents would be boomers, I guess. And you look at like what they paid for the house we grew up in, you could barely buy what's a mid-size SUV for a family now. And you'd be, you know, and you'd be on the hook for that for like 10%, you know. Um, and it's just, it's ridiculous. Oh man, it's just, I mean, the automotive industry in itself, it's like, I love cars, but gosh, we built so many of them, and too many of them. Like, do you need them every year? I mean, you can replace engines. There's a lot, there's a lot of things we could do. We could look at a lot differently. If I'm trailing off, let me know.
No, but that, I think a lot of this stuff what you're saying goes into the system has gotten out of control.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like like I was saying earlier, we have everything we need, right? We're at that kind of point in history. We don't need, you know, the problem with capitalism inherently is the consumerism, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
we've got the, you know, it's just buy, and we're wasting so much stuff, so much material good. It's not that material things are bad, but when you're overusing them and throwing them away, and your life just becomes material excess to the point that you're overworking yourself to attain things you think you need, you really don't. One of my favorite things I used to bring up to Lyft and Uber customers actually was, if you don't like cars, why would you drive a car? And this is a big jam on the Toyota Prius, and so sorry Prius owners, but like the the Toyota Prius is a fundamentally flawed car because it's designed for people that don't like cars. Why would you buy a car if you don't like cars? If you think that's what's killing the environment, like, do your part, because if you don't like cars, you probably don't maintain cars, right? So you don't take care of it. I remember, actually, it was a Toyota Prius. It's just so disgusting to me. It was, you know, this wasn't even a 10-year-old car. This was in Portland, Oregon. it was growing mold and moss on the sides. And it's like one of those people that don't wash their cars because they're trying to save the environment. It's like, no, you just rotted all these precious minerals into the ground, and you paid like $30,000 for it. Like, what's wrong with you? I, it's and that was kind of also my way to get people to be my customers, repeat customers. Like, yeah, just pay for a Lyft or an Uber. But
Mm-hmm.
you know but it's just, and that's just like kind of the way I think, and a way we can teach people to think maybe a little more like that, not all like that, but and we can just, like I said, just do a lot better for the
I
whole world.
agree. And that's something you said there about you're on the West Coast, and we talked about this in episode 35 with Tina Landis. She's affiliated with the Party of Socialism and Liberation,
Yeah,
and we talked about some of the environmental contradictions and a lot of the misconceptions that people have outside of the West Coast about the West Coast being such an eco-friendly, environmentally conscious area. But like you said, some of these same people, they will buy $30,000 vehicles saying that they don't believe in polluting the air. But I
yeah,
think that's also a false premise, because it's really a societal issue. The climate is
right.
not one individual person causing
People,
climate problems.
right, exactly. And you can break down a lot of different sciences, and with cars, and they're not as bad as we play them to be. But I think what the issue is it goes back to the consumerism. Is we just, instead of people thinking like, oh, I don't like cars, I don't need a car, we have people thinking, I need a car and I need that payment because that's the only way I can survive in the United States. That's the only way I can get to my job. That's the only way, I have to have this. And that's just, that's something we can just do better on. um and car salesmen, if they like their job, they're not going to like me, but you know but like, I've always had kind of junky cars, but I like nice cars too, usually with like the V8s. And it's like, I always thought about, like, you see like an old classic C10 truck, or a Ford Mustang or a Camaro or a Corvette, like, um when people buy those cars, and a pickup truck, even if it's a pickup truck for work, like a farm truck, that's a vehicle. Like, yeah, it's got the V8, and everybody's scared of the V8. Well, those are really efficient engines mechanically. But like, those are vehicles people intend on keeping and handing down, right? When people buy like a Honda Civic or a Toyota Corolla or a Toyota Prius, or an economy car, they plan on leasing it for like 5 years and getting another one, or throwing it away, right? And that's, so to me, it's just like, I think the economy car is kind of worthless. You know, you get an old pickup truck, you get a pickup truck with a good frame, and if you can get off your butt and you're a little more mechanically inclined than me, you can just put new engines in it for the life of the truck. You can put new brakes on it later. You look at stuff like the SEMA car shows and stuff like that. And you kind of look at it a little more abstractly. Hot rodding is actually some of the best recycling in the world, because we're just rebuilding all these cars and we're making them better, and they're more efficient, and they just use the same old technologies, and they're not, some of them have more EPA stuff because of the era they were in, some don't. But when people are building the same car or rebuilding the same car, I feel like they're they're more part of the solution in a lot of ways, because they're also thinking a lot more creatively. But that's part of the solution, right? Is thinking like that. And it's not just cars, there's other things we can restore, but I'm car minded, so that's how I'm going to use my example. That's what I'm going to use for examples a lot of
No,
times.
I get what you're saying. And I urge my listeners again to, if you haven't listened to that episode, a recent episode 35 with Tina Landis, her book Climate Solutions Beyond Capitalism, I think is a must read. It's a very short read. I read it in about 3 hours, and it just has a lot of data, and it sort of debunks a lot of these misconceptions about how we can't reverse climate change. we can do it really quickly. It's just we have people tied to the fossil fuel industry and everything else, and these oil companies and stuff, and so they don't have any reason to want to
Well,
change anything because they're tied to the money.
well, and another thing that I've always brought up with alternative fuels and things like that is there's no reason to just get rid of all the oil, right? Like, because it's good technology, and everything in moderation. Um, it takes the cycles a lot longer. It is technically a renewable resource, but it's millions of years. Um, and it burns clean, and with a lower population and more trees, you can make an argument that the carbon doesn't, it's offset a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of ways you go with it, but the big thing is, um what I'm getting at is the moderation, everything in moderation. So if only 10% of cars were E100 alcohol, right? Ethanol, like no gas mixed in it at all. Like, and that's better for tuning if your engine runs on either gas or alcohol, right? But that's what's cool about the internal combustion engine. We don't have to get rid of it. It's great technology. We can make oil out of all kinds of plants. We can keep using oil out of the ground. 10% of cars are ethanol, and 10% of cars on the road now are electric, right? And then 80%. The difference between now, where it's probably still like 90, 95, 99% gas, like just that 20% being an alternative fuel and electric cars is going to make a huge difference in the air quality. Because the other thing you have to consider, like with the electric cars, is like batteries and electronics are um, they're their own waste problem. I remember studies from the late 90s and early 2000s as a kid, a teenager, young adult, um, talking about how just personal computers and cell phones alone, the litter, just from throwing them away by like 2010, was supposed to eclipse fossil fuel damage to the world. That's 13 years ago. So
Mm-hmm.
so you don't want to necessarily just go. I think if you went all electric cars, you'd create the same problem that you have with all oil cars, right?
100%.
You're stressing this resource, to its max. So it's all about moderation and just critical thinking, and that way we can all enjoy these technologies we have, and we don't have to bicker about who's destroying what, if we all have the knowledge of how our stuff works and how to take care of it. And then, no reason we can't do that. That's kind of my thought.
I want to tell my audience too that what I read earlier about Medicare and Social Security, I'm about to read something else. This is
Yeah.
all from Gavin Bonney's website. Bring back my Bonnie for Prez.com, but it's through his Twitter page. That's how we found each other. But I wanted to read a part here about UBI, and we can kind of, I guess,
Yeah.
problematize this. But I want my audience to get this information. Gavin writes, a universal basic income would be dangerous for humanity by most accounts. Welfare, as described by FDR, is a subtle destroyer of the human spirit. Universal basic income is the penultimate version of welfare. The solution to our income woes lies in the reform of how we determine wages and the value of the dollar. With autonomy on the rise, creating a shortage of manual labor work, more autonomy, I guess you mean automation.
Yeah.
Yeah. More humans will have to turn to some form of service industry to fulfill the void and find purpose in their lives. They also cannot commit their time to serving others if their wages do not provide enough income to cover their basic expenses like housing and food. There are probably more empty homes and apartments in America than there are homeless people. And the reason that is because our monetary system and government administrations have failed us. So many homeless and unemployed Americans are willing to work and want something to do with their day, but the wages do not justify the effort to show up. So many homeless Americans living in cars are employed with great wages, but one forgivable mistake in this fragile economy and social environment is all it takes to end up sleeping on the streets in the United States of America. That last point is the reason why I was like, wouldn't there be an argument for UBI for that precisely for that reason that you can have a good job, but just all of a sudden it can just come crumbling down?
Right. And that's where, like I said, I go back and forth a little bit with it, because you do have people on disability. But it's if stuff was affordable in the first place, so
Mm,
right, like if you owned your house before you were 35 years old and you lost your job, you could maybe survive for a couple weeks. Or it would be a lot easier to do something silly like DoorDash or go be a waiter, right? To take care, to at least keep your house stocked with food and things like that. Um, but right now we're so stressed out. Every second of our day is so accounted for, and the amount we're like, our time itself isn't being compensated, really fairly.
mm-hmm.
Um, in one So one way I've kind of thought of, and I talked to my friend about it, and I'm not really sure how you'd implement it, but it's like, you think about like the gold standard, and like how we do banking now is like, if you somehow made people's time worth, if you measured the time so that people were all paid the same based on time, because that's what's valuable. Kind of like how gold used to be, that was what was valuable. That's what made your dollar valuable. Well, what needs to make our dollar valuable is our time, because that's all we have. Like, that's all any of us have is our time. And so if we're wasting our time at a job that's unfulfilling versus at least getting enough to pursue our hobbies, um, people will be a lot happier. And that's a good thing.
Interesting. And you could make the argument that if you want to make money in that free time, you could if you wanted to.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I'm not saying get rid of pay scales, like, but make it so that the minimum wage actually covers, you know, a decent life, so you're not embarrassed when you go out, or too embarrassed to go out, or have people to your house, or anything like that, um because yeah, sure, if someone is more intelligent and doing something that takes more skill, they deserve a little bit more compensation for it. But anyone who's willing to use their time to do something for you should be compensated at least enough that they can go live their individual life. Like,
Hmm.
duh. Like, I mean,
Right. But what you said then made is interesting about you mentioned the gold standard and you had that on there. All this stuff caught my attention when I was reading your site. Like I said, it's not a lot of information to sort of like overload you, but I get the general idea of where you're coming
yeah,
from. Just when you talked about Nixon getting us off the gold standard, and we basically just got stuff backed by what government bonds, and
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And it's like, and it's all really boring stuff, some of it. And it's so dumb. And like, my kind of theory, I guess it'd be a theory, is that when go into the government bonds, they're really just war bonds, right? And so you have a lot of our currency is backed by our ability to make war, and
yep,
a lot of countries buy that. And that's why, kind of why we have to keep doing things like the F-35. Like, maybe I shouldn't talk about this. Maybe I should. I don't know. Uh, I'm free now. So I got a DD-214. But I remember it was just, I mean, there's so many hiccups. But I mean, this is true with all planes and technology. I mean, you're trying to fly. Man wasn't meant to fly. But the F-35 was just so expensive. And I remember witnessing these things, and I was just like, gosh, like, why don't you just keep building F-18s? Of course, and Russia has a better jet, and now China's got better jets, and well, I got better jets, or whatever. you know um,
hmm,
but it was just like, gosh, it's so much a waste of money. And a big part of the F-35 too is so many countries invested in it, is we almost did try to just almost go a different direction, But there were so many other countries that had invested in it too. It's like, gosh, there's just so much money on oh, and I got a good segue for this, but it's just so much money on something that's meant to destroy life. Uh, and that's, it's kind of ridiculous when you think about it. The people that work on those jets don't even make enough money to buy, for the most part, like a Corvette.
Mm-hmm.
E1 through E5, before you get your BAH, you're working on the jets. Yeah, there's people that do more and less, but like you can't you your salary, if you're living in the barracks and you're not deployed or anything, is under $30,000 a year. You can't go buy a Corvette on that. Like, you can hardly even buy food. You can't buy a house with that. You can't, of course you're in the military and you got your stuff provided for you otherwise, but that's ridiculous. But when you look at it, like, there's a lot of people working for that much money, and they have to pay their rent,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, they really can't buy a Corvette,
Well, they can, but they just become debt slaves.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. And
Yeah.
that's not the point of a Corvette. Corvettes are fun. Have you ever driven a Corvette?
No, I haven't.
I've driven a couple now. I've got one at home. They're great cars. I think it's the best American product ever built.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and sure, it's nichey because it's a sports car. But I mean, as far as all the things that come out of the United States, that's come on. It's the Corvette, Chevy Corvette. Yeah, give it its flowers. It's cool. It's America's sports car.
So, so that's cool. So you're kind of I won't say you're on the fence about UBI. Like, you obviously have a view about it, but you're versatile enough to, like, definitely consider. You mentioned disability. Like, you
Right,
recognize
and
that there's
unemployment.
circumstances.
If you open up programs like disability and unemployment so that they're easier to attain and more rationally legislated, I guess, your UBI, your necessity for UBI, I would think, would diminish.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a lot of people with, like, I have nagging injuries. That's why it's been hard for me to keep kind of some of the jobs I'm used to having, is because I can't work 12 hours without being so sore I can't move the next day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's just, we don't need people feeling like that all the time. you know if people are hurt but they're still willing to work, we should work with them, not against them. So
And so you said something earlier. Because we talked about student debt a little bit, and you said you didn't seem to be pro, like, elimination of student debt. Like, you emphasize, like, responsibility because you're taking out a loan beforehand. But
yeah,
with regards to UBI and the non-necessity of it, do you think that the government should provide some basic services to avoid even having a UBI, and what would those services be if you do agree with that?
the big one would just be Medicare, just making Medicare and going to the doctor accessible for everyone,
Mm-hmm.
um, and so that the doctors are still compensated. um, and that's the biggest thing. There's a lot of people in medical debt, and a lot of people that struggle with their jobs because they're hurt, and then because they're hurt they have to pay for physical therapy, and different insurances don't cover this or that, so you pay half of this or that. And so the biggest thing that would help negate the necessity of a UBI, along with making those other things easier, is Medicare. Making and just making medicine make sense, making going to the doctor make sense. You fall off your bike, you're bleeding a little too much, you go to the doctor, you go to the ER, you get taken care of, you go home, you don't get a $6,000 bill later in the mail, and that's stupid. It's just
Mm-hmm.
stupid.
And you said something about the minimum wage, and I'm kind of torn on minimum wage. I think there's too much emphasis on it personally,
Yeah,
because the minimum wage is almost a mute point if we continue going down the road we're going with this the way our dollar is.
yeah.
I mean,
Well,
it's like there's really no point. I mean, you can raise it to $100. I mean, if you get
yeah,
so inflated, I mean, it's like
exactly.
what's going to be the purpose?
Exactly, and that's what I was talking about earlier with inflation. It never goes away. You can just slow it down, and but like, well, and that's why with minimum wage, there's a saying. Buddy I worked with on helicopters, he said, if the minimum wasn't good enough, it wouldn't be the minimum. The problem with minimum wage is it isn't good enough. So
Mm,
you just need to find where that balance is to make minimum wage good enough.
interesting. Mm. I had a question about the relationship between AI and universal basic income, because you
Yeah,
did mention earlier in your description here on your site about the propensity maybe of people becoming lazy if they are provided a
yeah,
universal basic income. My friend Ben Sadegafar, who's going to come on the show again in a couple of weeks, he was on episode 3, and we talked some about automation and AIs, but this came up in conversation a few weeks ago. Where do you see AI with regards to this universal basic income? Would AI create a society? Ideally, if I don't think it's going to ever get on that scale, but let's just say hypothetically the AI grows like immensely to the point where it takes away jobs from people. Would that require some sort of a compensation for everyone at that point if it's taking jobs away from people?
it would kind of depend on how many jobs, because you also with AI. Now, in my personal views with AI are a little conservative. I don't think we should go too far, but
Okay.
um, but it's gonna happen. um, so, but with AI, there's gonna be jobs taken away, but there's still gonna be need for maintenance. Um, that's technology's weakness, right? Someone has to build it, someone has to maintain it.
Mm,
So there's still gonna be a use for people in that regard. Um, like I said, and yeah, I mean, obviously, it's going to people are, well, you don't need us. It's like, well, but also you need to find something else to do. But then another part of it is as we consume less, we don't need as much money. If we don't need as much money, we don't need to work as much. And if we own our house, we don't have to work as much, right? Um, and then maybe there is a point, in like a super utopia where you could have a universal basic income and people don't get lazy. But where I'm at in my evolution and the way I see things, I think that you know we were made to work, but working doesn't necessarily mean being a slave, right?
mhm.
Working can be fun. It can be doing something. I work out a lot. I'm definitely one of those. My body is my temple people. I'm in the gym, 5 6 days a week. A lot of physical therapy and a lot of bodybuilding. Um, and and so it's just funny because like I'm burnt out on a lot of things, with personal depression as far as money and the world itself. But like if you say I'm not a hard worker, it's like there's a lot of people who be like, well, go to the gym with him, you
Mhm.
know, because I can work, that's not the
Right.
problem.
Oh, I
I
see
can
what
work.
you.
And
Mhm.
there's a lot of people, and that's why, I don't professional athletes that want big money. I don't hate them for it. They're not even asking compared to like the real rich people, the wealthy people. They're not even asking for that much money. And and the whole argument that people make, the whole conservative liberal uh point there, the pick yourself up by the bootstraps and do it. It's like, well, if you think an athlete's getting paid too much money, why don't you just go to the gym and learn how to shoot a ball or throw a ball or so I you know Do I have my opinions of certain players if they're worth a certain amount? Of course, but I don't think athletes are overpaid in that regard. In that, that's their body. They took very good care of their body. It's a lot of work to maintain your body at that level, and people should strive to maintain their body at those levels. And other people that do, stay like that, like people that go to school and become doctors and things like that, like once they get out of their student debt, there's a lot of them that aren't that much poorer, probably even richer than a lot of athletes, because their career is just so much longer too. Yeah, I can go on ramble about bodies in a lot of different directions.
No, that's cool, because these ideas are still there. It also, it goes into what you said earlier, the way you think, the critical thinking, making these comparisons and stuff, putting things into context. I think that message resonates with a lot of people,
Yeah.
regardless of whatever analogy you use. You do have some funny stuff on your site that listed. You have here, I earned this crow. Joe Biden can never earn this crow. Donald Trump can never earn this crow. No
That's
former
right.
president can earn this crow. And I'm sorry, when I saw that, I was, because I make the joke Jim Crow Joe all the time.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what that was about, but
Yeah.
I just I died laughing when I saw on there. You're basically, it's almost like you're trolling the president.
Well, it is though. I was enlisted. I earned to be a second class petty officer, to be any E1, E1 through E9, E10. I think there's E10 in a couple branches, maybe. You have to be enlisted, and to be a chief warrant officer, you have to be enlisted. To be an officer, you don't have to be enlisted, but once you're an officer or a president, something that ranks over, you can't go back, right? So I think there's a lot of pride, and there's a lot of people who were enlisted and people who went enlisted to officer all share this pride. It's definitely, and it's something that I would hope, if my campaign did take off, I would hope would be one of my strengths, is that you do have to be enlisted. You have to start from the bottom. And that's something that I don't think a lot of presidents have had to do for a while.
I agree with that. No,
Yeah.
I was thinking, just the people I've interviewed, I think a lot of people in this country is reflective of the society. And I don't understand why people, like, just reading your site. I mean, you have very sensible views. And there's so many people running for office. That's another thing. The visibility aspect is something that frustrates me like crazy. And that'll go into like one of the two final questions I have for you. But there's so many people, audience and everyone else, running for president of the United States. There are thousands of people that are running. But again, how those ideas ever going to be recognized and acknowledged if the powers that be decide not to talk about it? Sure, you can file with the FEC, but
well, and like someone like me, I experienced it in the military. The type of people I get attention from, it's harder for me because of the way I think to get that. Like, that's why I think part of the reason my domain name is kind of screwed up, right? Because I can't just go tell people type this in, because each time I do it, it shows up. But if I send them the physical link, that's why I put it up on my Twitter. Or if I text you, like, I can text you the link, I can message you the link. But for some reason, you can't just type in the domain name, which I paid the $12 or $13 for. Woo, and it doesn't come up. But I think also, if I read the fine print, I probably would just run into, no, we just want more money, which I don't have.
But you hit something there, because I was thinking before the interview, and this is how, I mean, honestly, I've told people this before. I go to Ballotpedia, and that's how I've been able to find anyone running for any public office. You go to Ballotpedia.
Yeah.
If it was for Ballotpedia, I wouldn't know anyone running for office, really, because unless just the people who the mainstream promote. But if you type in Gavin Bonney in Google, they can set up the algorithm any way they want. You would think under a real system, I can type my name in and my name comes up in the algorithm in certain situations.
Yeah.
But that just shows you right there how all this stuff is manipulated, even from the technology is
Yep.
manipulated, just visibilizing people. And
And
if
that's
someone's run for president, you should be able to type in their name, independent, that name in the party. And in a lot of cases, it still doesn't even come up in the first few links.
yeah,
And that's a travesty.
yeah, it really is. Um, and in an older internet, you might actually find my website. I'd say 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more. You would at least a couple pages down. But I'm sure if you type my name, I think I've typed my name in, and ever since I got arrested for street racing when I was 20, that left my record almost 10 years ago itself, actually more. Uh, I'm not even the first Gavin Bonney that comes up, period. Like if you're like doing like a Facebook search, there's a bunch of Brits with my name, I guess.
Yep.
Uh, and
Yeah.
a lot of us are into cars, though. I think that's pretty cool. It's like, yeah, the Gavin Bonnies are into cars. All right,
That's funny.
yeah, but yeah, and yeah, that is a travesty, especially when you look at, something like this idea that voting is our super right in the United States. Like this is how we all make a difference, right? But when we can't hear these other voices, because even if someone like me doesn't win, if I don't get on the TV, say I do get on the TV, right? Whoever does win might steal my ideas, right? Which, you might grumble to yourself, like, I was going to do that. But at the same time, like, if this is what you're doing and what you're trying to do, and someone else does it after you lost, at least it was done, right? But those ideas don't even get out there, right? The competition doesn't have to compete.
100%. And to go to your point, and I wasn't even going to bring this up. I may have mentioned this a few times off camera with people about this, because you hear people all the time say that they're anti-corporate media. They don't want to watch the stuff on television anymore. They want to go outside the New York Times and outside the Wall Street Journal and
You
stuff.
almost have to, though, so you can
Yeah,
read between the lines.
yeah, but I was going to say what you just said. Then these so-called independent bread tube YouTube channels,
Yeah,
what they do like a lot of these comedians are doing. Like these comedians get big and they get to this certain level, but you have your local comic, and then you have people going in and stealing the local comic's jokes. So how do
yeah,
you have any way of tracking that evidence? And the same thing is going with YouTube. And I'm not even going to call out people. Um, I just think that there's a lack of originality, even in independent media. A lot of times, there's a copycat phase going on, and these
yeah,
so-called independent channels are almost parroting the mainstream media. So if you're an independent channel, why are you so focused on the mainstream media? Like if you look at my channel, we talk
yeah,
about very deep issues, but the
yeah.
people like the
You're
Jimmy Dores of the
you're not
world, and
you're not
I did out
you're
some
not the
ones.
Daily Show, right? Yeah, you're not the Daily Show. Don't attack the other channels, right? That's always what I loved about it when Jon Stewart created he was like the attack on all of it. So like, but
Yeah,
I like what you're saying is like that's not your job. You're if you're trying to come out with other ideas as an independent thinker, just replaying something and then kind of respinning it, yeah, it gets dull after a while, and eventually people are just saying the same thing, and it sucks.
but it grows subscribers, and I've seen
Right.
this, and like I said, and I know I have people that follow me that love Jimmy Dore. They think Jimmy Dore is like the
Yeah.
king of the world, and they think that Joe Rogan is the king of the world. And I have
Yeah.
nothing against those guys at all. I would actually argue that Joe Rogan kind of set the template, and Jimmy
I
Dore
always liked
followed
him as a comedian back in the day.
it.
I thought he was hilarious, and I've had I actually emailed his show when I first made the site a while back. I emailed it to his show, but only once. But I I I don't watch his podcast that much, but people would come back to me and be like, "You sound like Joe Rogan." I'm like, I got, there's only so many viewpoints in the world.
Exactly, exactly, and that's
Yeah,
why it sticks because it reflects the undertone
yeah,
of a lot of everyday Americans.
Yep.
But I did want to ask you about the visibility aspect of your campaign. Do you plan on expanding with visibility? Like, do you have a team in place or the ambitions for that? Because it's still
Um,
relatively early in the process.
yeah, it's still early in the process, and I'm kind of hoping, like, with this being basically my first interview, I need a team. I know there's no way I can do it without a team, and I think with, where I'm at in my life, what I need is outside influence, outside people like you who don't know me, to start to show some support somehow, and kind of get the ball rolling, because then my people that are close to me will start to come out of the woodwork. But they're my friends, so they're kind of looking at this very skeptically, because they also know, the hardships I'm going through and things like that,
Hmm.
the other side of my life. But yeah, that's, as far as visibility, that's this is part of that process. And I do need a team, and I need people to be interested who are, quicker at scanning through legislation, and quicker at understanding administrative type things, because what I'm doing basically right now, as far as security administrative stuff, is I'm the only person at all on any of it. I'm the campaign manager. That way, um, I've only gotten $5 so far. One guy on the internet, we were
I
joking
saw
around.
that on there.
Yeah. you know, I'm not a very good beggar for money, but I mean, I need it to do this, and I have ideas. I have some humorous ideas for, like, campaign commercials. I also have serious ideas. I like to keep it upbeat and a little bit humorous, because some of the viewpoints and some of the rabbit holes that I go down are a little extreme. Um, so I don't, and I don't think that people shouldn't know them, but I understand, where we're at, and where most people are at, as far as some of these concepts are frightening, right?
Hmm.
Potentially. And for other people, it's just like, oh yeah, it's just the way the world works. Like, what do you expect? Um,
I I had a question. You had something about the space race that there's no
yeah,
information there. Is that something that you're developing with that? Like, because for you to emphasize that is a very specific thing, is the space
yeah.
race.
And I think that goes back into, like, the military and government service thing. I think, if the Earth isn't flat, I don't think the Earth is flat. But I mean, then, and we can go to space, and we have the technology. I think we should pursue it. I'm definitely someone who would be more inclined to believe that there were aliens, and maybe even that they had a play in our race a long, long time ago. Um, but I'm not going to get into that politically,
Hmm.
necessarily, right now, anyway. Who knows? Who knows when I'm on TV right now?
I'm
But
curious. I feel like I guess I'm justified in asking this question
yeah,
because you did mention 9/11 and
yeah,
I haven't really delved in. My audience doesn't really know a lot about my views into that stuff. A lot of people from afar, maybe they wouldn't label me as such and such, but I mean, I have free thinker in my title, so I'm
yeah,
clearly making a stance, and I welcome these so-called conspiracy theorists on my forum. I just think it's being a critical thinker. I just think conspiracy theorists has been um, mischaracterized as something that goes outside of the mainstream
yeah.
and then people
And
discover
what
years later, like there was a lot of validity to those views.
Yeah, and what happens with conspiracy theory, and it's all part of the vernacular and the hypnosis, if you will. Um, it's Conspiracy and theory are two different things. There are conspiracies. People conspire, right? Um, for better or worse. And then there's theories, and, like I was talking about music theory, right? So conspiracy and theory, you put them together, like, this is my theory of a conspiracy people are doing, right?
Hmm.
It's not much more than that. And some of these conspiracies are true, but it's with the repetition and the kind of the negative stigma of conspiracy theorist, right? It keeps people from looking down those rabbit holes. Like a lot of things, kind of a funny plug, but back to the flat Earth thing. I think it was like 2018 was 2017, 2018. Flat Earth had this kind of like surge, and like they got Kyrie Irving,
Oh yeah.
yeah, and I fell asleep one night on the couch, and some of the other stuff I was watching was a little more spiritual oriented, but it left over into the flat Earth stuff. And I watched a lot of like psychology stuff and a lot of U.S. National Archives. I like my rabbit holes. And some of the stuff about 3 or 4 episodes into this one particular channel, there was information in there that I kind of knew to be true just from what I'd observed in the world, didn't necessarily mean the Earth was flat. And I think part of the reason someone like Kyrie Irving and I encourage this type of thought, what he said, do your own research, isn't because he necessarily thinks the Earth is flat or I think the Earth is flat. It's because there were other things in those videos. If you opened your mind to at least laughing at it, there was just little nuggets of information that changed how you thought or maybe perceived the world. So there's that.
The question I was going to ask you was, what's your view about the moon landing back in the '60s? Because you had that on your site, the space race. Because I'm thinking like, because a lot of people, if you view this about building 7, then what's your view on that? You open to the possibility of that.
I have reasons to think that maybe they staged it because of how technology was possible at the time, but I also at the same time, like, that's some of those theories are just way too much for me. I could see maybe the logic behind staging it, but I also don't and we haven't gone back. That's one, like, I'll give you that. Like, we haven't gone back, but is there a reason to go back too, is the other part of it. I think we probably did land on the moon. I think people have showed me pictures of like their telescope and they've like found the flag or something. So I'm not, but I do agree with some of the stuff is really funny. Actually, I posted it on one of my personal accounts. They lost all the data to get to the moon, right? Like the math, and this was like published in the New York Times or something. This was like or Washington Post, like a nationally accredited newspaper. And because they were trying to go back, and NASA said, if I was quick, I could find it. But their paraphrase, like, yeah, we lost it all. We can't, like, someone asked if we could go back to the moon. It was 15 years later, and their cycle was that they deleted all like a certain amount of data, and like that data like cycle is really just silly. So I think, like I said, I don't think the Earth is flat. The moon thing, I could possibly see it being staged, but I don't know, man. It also seems like there's a lot of people that'll come up with a picture of the flag on the moon. And I do know, like, there's things about sending the human body out of the atmosphere, like the temperatures it gets in it, the types of metals that we have and have discovered. There's some debate to be had there that we can even get out of our atmosphere with our body intact, without astral projecting. Woo! But so yeah, and so that's why I'd be interested in the space race, because I've seen I don't know if you ever heard of like the Gaia station, and that you can subscribe to it, and it's way pro alien stuff. And and I apply I have a thirds rule. 1/3, and I learned this from an article I read. Basically, 1/3 of what CNN and Fox say is bullshit. Another third is embellished truth, and then another third is just truth, right? So I kind of
Okay.
apply that. I imply that even if I'm watching like InfoWars with Alex Jones,
Right.
right? Um, and so the moon stuff, that's kind of how I look at it, I guess. It's, but yeah, we need to get to space. Like I was saying with the referencing the guy channel, sorry. If space is out there, it needs to be public knowledge. There's no reason, like, my personal view is, like, if you found out that you were just totally wrong about everything as far as creation or outer space, and whatever, like, why, would that really, but you were still alive, like, would you go haul off and, like, murder your whole family? No, you're gonna move on with your life and adapt. So I think with space, we need to explore it. I'm not a huge space nerd, like some of these other people, but I think going to space is important if it's there, especially
Interesting.
so, you know, you can shut all the flat earthers up. Jesus.
It'd be a lot more interesting than like you said, bombing other countries, killing people over the
Exactly.
world.
Yep.
It's really an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, and you don't know if you're going to find a peaceful society or if you're going to find an aggressive society. I would think from what I've learned in the rabbit holes, I'll call them, uh, most civilizations above us or where we're trying to get are very peaceful. We're not going to run into a lot of controversy or war necessarily, but at the same time, there's always that balance to the universe. So, like I said, you got to keep your guard up. That's martial law. I think that's an important thing to keep is martial law.
Well, Mr. Gavin Bonney, I'm glad that I interviewed you, and like I said, we'd love you to have you back as a part of the presidential debate discussion later this summer if you be willing to participate in that as well.
Yeah, I'd be okay with that. It'd be great, get my voice out there, and hopefully this interview will get me a little more attention, and I put a little more focus back on the campaign. When there wasn't a lot going on over the winter, dealing with some personal stuff, and but I do feel compelled to pursue this endeavor.
Well, more power to you for sure. And I also want to ask if a viewer or subscriber or anyone else, listener, wanted to engage with you one on one and had a question for you or something, what would be the easiest way for that person to contact you?
Um, as far as for being president and stuff, Twitter would actually be the best way. I do have two phones. One I got like my personal Facebook and Instagram and stuff on, and then this one actually I'm using for the interview. I keep my president stuff on, do DoorDash and things like that. So yeah, uh, it's it's a private enough line. I'm at the point where I don't have too much attention that I can't answer people's messages. Um, I do put my phones down, when I'm in the gym or outside, but I try my best to respond, and I try not to be a shithead, but I know often I am. So, uh, yeah, yeah. Just reach out on Twitter, which I forget what it is. Hold on.
I'll
Oh,
link all that in the description. I'll link your
awesome.
Twitter and your Facebook, because I think I follow you on Facebook as well. Once because
Okay.
I think you follow
Yeah,
me first, and I follow you back, and then I start
and the
following your
Facebook,
Facebook.
the Facebook and Twitter account, especially the Facebook account, would be something that I would like to turn over to somebody. Um, Especially because right now the Facebook account actually somehow kind of algorithmically got tied into my original account, so I haven't been using it because it's just wonky. Um, and Facebook, I'd like to get rid of my personal Facebook account, to be honest. The most days.
I've deactivated quite a few times.
Yeah. But Twitter, Twitter, like you said, it can be a cesspool, but it's quick, it's easy. Sometimes it's nice, only the 140 characters, and direct message is fine. Um, I don't I don't bite. It'd be cool to hear from people that aren't robots. It's nice hearing from you. That's for sure. Um,
Yeah, definitely. And
I'm
I'm going to make sure they my audience can make sure if you click on Gavin's page that his website there as the Google Doc is accessible right there as soon as you click on his Twitter
yeah.
account.
And you can, if you highlight it like the whole thing and then post it like in your thing here, you can post that website as long as you do that whole weird link.
Okay.
That will open the home page. But like I said, for some reason, you just type in the domain name. I don't think I've paid enough money for it yet. So
Mm-hmm.
so it is what it is. And yeah, and the website, it is meant to be a little funny and a little cryptic. Um, some of you people that were woke before woke became what it is now might get a good laugh out of a couple of them memes. I see you smiling.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
I enjoyed the site. It's a change from the conventional, but that's
yeah,
good, and that's kind of the way I wanted to configure this field of candidates. I think
yeah.
it's going to end up being 7 people total in
Okay.
this independent presidential candidate field. We have a libertarian, Mike Termott, who's running. I think he's based in Virginia. He was in
Yeah,
Florida, but now he's based in Virginia. There's a fellow Oregonian, Brittany
yeah,
Jones. She's running as unaffiliated, I think, and so you have unaffiliated. Hashaki Nichols is running as unaffiliated, I think. So we have
yeah,
lots of independents running. I haven't been able to get a green person um, present, and that's another thing about these campaigns. I don't think some of these people are ambitious enough that the least that a person I think can do when you're operating outside of the duopoly is to accept invitations. And I'm
yeah,
not going to call some people by names, but I've reached out to a lot of people, and not just anybody. I've reached out to people who actually have views in the website. I don't reach out to people just because they have their name on Ballotpedia. And so if you have views that I think are worth looking into, I will reach out to you. But you'd be surprised how many people don't even respond when you send a
yeah,
message, and you think that they want the extra visibility. So I'm glad that the people that I have contacted have responded, and we've had great conversations.
yeah, yeah. I'm excited. I think I kind of look at it as something there's a tipping point or a line for me that of exposure that there's no way I could lose. Like,
Hmm.
um, but to get to that point, um, I think I'm a little ways from that point. But I just
Mm.
that's of all the things I don't have confidence about. There's something I have this weird confidence about is that if I did somehow get to the national stage, I just don't think I could lose. I don't think it's possible.
And I think that's what scares the system. I mean, this is a farce of a system as it is, but that's exactly the reason why they don't want more people there because they know that innately people would be gravitating towards other views, like automatically.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of those views being.
Regu- Regular people with regular debt and regular problems,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
It's a
that's
powerful message. That's the majority of the
yeah,
country.
yeah, that's everybody,
Mhm.
it's yeah, I ain't a slave.
Yeah,
I yeah.
for sure.
There are theories that suggest I am though, and that's what we need to change.
100%. Um, we have a lot of people down the road on the forum. Mr. Gavin Bonney, we've talked over an hour and a half today, and we've learned a little bit more about Gavin's campaign and his run for president of the United States in 2024. And I urge all my listeners to consider their support behind independent minor party candidates that I have on the platform. I'm not going to endorse anyone in particular because I don't think it would be fair to anyone. But me giving the voice to these people, I think that's kind of my contribution
Yeah,
to the process, and then everyone else can kind of make their own decisions. But this is my way of kind of just exposing people and sort of operating outside of these paradigms. We have to do something about these existing paradigms, and we can't just keep doing the same thing over and over. It hasn't worked in the past, and it doesn't seem like it's going to work in the foreseeable future. So that's kind of like my way of reaching out to independents, minor parties, and just different points of view when it comes to politicking. But we have, I'm trying to think who we have next on the forum. Monday, we have United for East Palestine, Palestine, I think is the way it's pronounced. The people in Ohio who are affected by the derailment and environmental problems that are persisted. We're going to have some representatives on Monday to discuss that. On Tuesday, we have Margaret Kimberly from Black Agenda Report to discuss 3 or 4 articles that she recently published in the month of March. We have Constance Every running for mayor of Knoxville as an independent. She was on the show in episode 2. We have my dad coming on for a special episode 50 in May. So that tells you how many more episodes we have going on between now and episode 50. I mean, this is episode 37, so I have quite a few more episodes just this month with Margaret Kimberly, like I said, Constance Every, United for East Palestine, Medea Benjamin from Code Pink, Norm Finkelstein, a renowned professor for years. He was ousted from academia for a long time. At DePaul University, they denied him tenure because of his views about Israel and Palestine, even though he's Jewish himself. So there's a lot of that stuff going on with the canceling of people before it became popular as it is now. We have activists from the state of Oregon coming on to the forum, and we just have a lot of activity going on. So please follow this particular channel on the YouTube channel and any of your favorite podcasting platforms. But beautiful people, this was a great episode 37 with Gavin Bonney, and I hope you all have a beautiful day. Thank you.
Bye.